So, for our long shot this week, we have Night of the Ronin. This clocks in at just over 35 minutes and it is pretty much action-packed all the way through. There's a bit of setup at the beginning. We've been dropped into the story. We can see that the girl's been beaten up quite significantly. We get a good sort of setup of him leaving caches of weapons all over the property so he can go grab them, which reminded me of two things. One, A Better Tomorrow, of course, the restaurant scene in that, but also one of my favorite films, Where Eagles Dare, which spends a lot of time showing you how meticulous their planning is for their escape. They set everything up so that when they do have to escape, it's all in place, and that's kind of what we get here, which I enjoyed. There's a couple of rather interesting things where they don't go the way you expect. I thought that was well done, and I must admit, I'm surprised it doesn't happen more often in these sort of films. And there's a pretty decent smattering of blood and guts along the way as well. Very, very enjoyable shot. Your thoughts, Rich?
Yes, I enjoy this a lot. We actually covered the lead guy, the Ronin, is played by a guy called Jeffim Cherokee. We covered a short fan film that he did called Han Wick. You may remember.
Yes, yeah.
Uh,
That was
in
very good.
2021.
Yeah, that
It
was a
was
lot
very
of fun.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the John Wick influence is very much apparent in this, which is directed by Nathan Bender, who's got quite a few things in his filmography, including another long shot, which was about a 50-minute film, which he did a few years before this. But he's so yeah. So this was made in New South Wales, and say it's very micro budget, but I think it uses its budget really well. The opening of the film is quite slow, and we get this sort of locked off shot of the heroine in profile,
Mm.
so we don't see
Yeah, don't see the
the
damage
the
straight away. Yeah.
yeah, sort of there's a nice reveal to that, and it builds its pace quite nicely. But then after about 7 minutes, it sort of launches straight in, and it becomes sort of a nighttime action. But again, nighttime action is not easy to do. So
Mm.
they've not made things particularly easy with them for themselves by trying to do a night shoot, although it does look really good. Unlike, say, we've talked about some films before where they've tried to avoid a night shoot by trying to do day for night, and it just hasn't really worked.
Mm.
This, you can clearly tell that they have shot it at night, and it looks sort of authentic. We get a bit like, say, like a John Wick kind of situation. We get wave of these sort of henchmen coming
Mm.
after our hero. The heroine is kind of sidelined, she's sort of tucked away for her own protection, although that doesn't quite work out the way they were hoping it would. But
Mm.
the action is very much on our hero protecting, fighting off the wave of bad guys. He's all dressed in black, but he's got a red tie, which I think must be a nod to Agent 47 in
All
the
right.
Hitman video game.
Yeah.
But apart from that, it's very John Wick. There's some nice. It's all set around this sort of farm location, and the action is pretty relentless for like 20 plus minutes or something. And it reminded me of a Johnny Young Bosch film called Broken Path,
Right.
directed by Koichi Sakamoto.
Hmm.
That's about an hour and 20 minutes on a. It's like, if I recall correctly, it's like in a similar rural location,
Yeah.
and it's just non-stop fighting. It's just so much fighting constantly, and in a way that was kind of detrimental because I thought an hour and a half of non-stop fighting was just too much. But in this case, and there's been some other films where they've tried to do that, and again, I think you can have too much of a good thing sometimes. This one, I think it's just about enough. If they'd have made this same film with the same amount of action, but then peppered more dialogue scenes in between, I think that would have been that. You've still got more than enough action.
Hmm.
There's a feature length film's amount of action in this short running time. Uh, there are some nice flourishes of visual effects, which I thought were very effective. So we get some uh, like broken glass kind of effects where it
Yep.
wouldn't have been practical for them necessarily to do that, um, in reality. But I thought you can tell it's visual effect, but it's just about good. It's good enough that you go with it, and it's fine. It's not one of those, oh, that looks really cheap kind of effects. It's actually quite effective, and there's some really nice gore effects. But we've also got some nice practical gore effects as well. There's plenty of blood, as you say. There's a lot of blood on display in this one. Yeah, really recommend it. There's some great characters. There's like this berserker character who I think is one of the choreographers himself. I think he's called Dread Skull. I think that's the right credit. But he's got this axe, and there's a very John
Mm.
Wicky moment where he throws the axe and the axe gets caught, and then and then it gets thrown back, and the other guy catches it. So they kind of throw it back and forth between each other. Earlier, one of the shorts, I think it was Bulletstorm, had a moment where a gun gets thrown and
Yeah,
caught, and
that's right.
and again, these are very sort of John Wicky kind of moments that are
Hmm.
happening in these things. Um, yeah, I thought the film, as you say, there's certain parts that don't play out exactly as you would have expected. I think the action is all shot really well. There's one part where there's a fight that the action is shot very close,
Hmm.
and I would have, and you can't really see what they're doing, and it just feels like it feels at odds with what everything else they were doing in the rest of the film, which is all quite distanced shots where you can see very clearly who's doing what and that they're doing it. The
Yeah.
close-up stuff just sort of really threw me. I
Hmm.
don't. It felt like maybe that they weren't able to do as much choreography in that scene as they wanted, so it was a bit of a shortcut to sort of keep the fight pace going, but without the demands of detailed choreography in those particular moments. But the rest of it is really good. Some of the shooting and the camera work is really nice. There's lots of dynamic tilts and smooth gliding motions and that
Hmm.
in certain sections of the film. I mean, for something that you're going to watch for free on YouTube, I think you can't do much. You can't do wrong really with this.
Yeah, you mentioned the the smoothness of the camera work. I mean, that's very apparent during the the swords battle at the end because they're on very uneven ground at times, and I was kind of
Mm.
expecting, I don't know if they used a drone or just a track or whatever, but they did a good job of keeping that seamless, and I love the how badly the guy gets chopped up at the end. It's well
Oh, that's
deserved.
crazy.
Yeah.
That's like proper. What was it? I was thinking of like something like the story of Ricky or something. It almost
Mm,
goes that far.
yeah. Yeah, it's very good indeed. There you have it. That is Night of the Ronin, our long shot for this episode. Go check it out.